Hello, everybody. It's been a little bit of a hiatus. Had a couple weeks off there, but it was to prepare a fantastic episode, which we have today. Before we get into that, I want to let you know that I'm John Sarakis, and this podcast and a lot of this work is brought to you by the Digital Mastermind. This is The Climb, and our show is about journeys. It's a podcast where we talk to digital agencies about business, marketing, technology. So if you want tips, tricks, you want mentorship, you want to be a mentor, then join our tribe of digital agencies. We stay in constant communication. We have a yearly event which is coming up, which is going to be in Viva Las Vegas this year on October 4th to the 6th. We also have biweekly calls, so there's nothing that's missed. So it's a continual check-in, making sure everybody's performing at the top of their game. And this is a group for agency owners. So if you want to grow your agency, go ahead and contact me. Shoot me an email, john@digitalmastermind.com, or find me on LinkedIn and go ahead and connect. I have a very, very specific last name. Let's just say that. So this is also live, so we welcome the interactions. If you're watching this recording, go ahead and comment, and we'll get back to you based on whatever it is that you say, good or bad. Today's episode is very exciting because it's about operations, and if you don't have good operations, then you will not have a business. To me, it's just as important as sales. And I'm lucky that I have a business partner who's also a co-host that is an exceptional operations manager. And we had a very special guest, which we'll get into today when we get into her clips, because she's created a company that is a function of fractional CFOs, which I find, fractional COOs, right? So you essentially hire her company, which is the operations agency. Her name's Alyson Caffrey, and they help you with all of your operations from a consulting standpoint, as well as a continual check-in where they really get a deep understanding of how your business functions, as well as the systems and the people who are behind it, even down to a cultural level. And I find it fascinating because there's this continual growth of companies that are fractional. You have CFOs, you have, fractional sales directors, fractional CMOs. And I think it's just one of those exciting things of the evolution of business and the way that we go about doing the things that we do. But I'd like to go ahead and welcome that co-host I mentioned that's pretty good at operations. Dave, good to see you.
Good to see you as well. Yeah, I love this topic. It's exciting. But I mean, at the core, without really strong operations, you don't have a business at all. You have a consultancy.
Yeah, a consultancy or a club or whatever, probably isn't making, money profitably.
Right. I mean, so your operations manual, your core of what you do is what you are. It's what makes the business a thing.
What are some good examples of, those manuals? Where else do we have some of those manuals in life?
I mean, if you live in an HOA, they have a bylaws that is basically the operating procedures of your neighborhood. Your city has city codes. That's the operating manual of your city, your state, and even the Constitution is an example of a operations manual for the country, how the country operates. Without it being documented in one of those documents, it's not a thing.
It's interesting that you bring up those, because a lot of people will try to think that, they're the rebel, they're the anarchist. And if it's somebody that, whether it's, Steve Jobs or somebody that's a graffiti artist that turns into building a company, or even some, hip hop star, no matter what, there's going to be process and systems that eventually grow into there if it's going to get to the level that they want, to that sellout status.
Yeah, you need to be able to repeat it. The visionary needs to be able to move on to other visionary projects. And if they are needed to constantly do the things that you've already, created, then that's just going to bog them down. So the process documenting is the way to get the person out of it and into a scalable, repeatable process so that they can go on to move on to other visionary things.
Right. And that document is only as good as the systems that are going to hold the people accountable to make sure that those things are actually happening.
Yeah.
All right. So let's, let's go ahead and start out with one of my favorite questions I love to ask a lot of these experts that we speak to. So we go to the clip where I asked Alyson, because she works with so many of these different companies, in agencies specifically, what, is her preference based on value-based pricing versus hourly? And I know I talk about this a lot, but I thought what you said was great.
So this is like the age-old question,
this is like
right?
the
And then the second
right?
one
And
that I
then
always
the
get
second
is
one
like,
that I
what
always
project
get is like,
management
what
tool do
project
we use?
management tool do we use?
So I personally think value-based
value-based pricing is the way to go.
Just only because you can really, how do I put this? It's for those entrepreneurs who are creative, right? It's those people who are like, I would really prefer to have budget parameters, not like strict budget guidelines. And we can really start to stretch a little bit and say, okay, as long as we stay within this range, we're good, right? We don't need to really feel the stress of, well, I have to now go back to this client and tell them that they have to have $325 extra for the hour we worked. It prevents gouging. So all of those things wrapped up in one really do support the value-based pricing. I personally use that for my agency. I always recommend that my clients use that. It just makes the experience, A, working with your team, B, being creative, and C, the experience with your client a lot better.
So value-based pricing, Dave, I know we've talked about this to almost ad nauseum, and I know there's so much money and there's so much profitability that can be created within it, but based on all the other mechanics that are there, for my logic, it's just something that I still can't agree with.
Yeah, I just don't believe in value-based pricing unless we were in a niche. I mean, I understand it makes sense to me if we were in an extreme niche. But generally speaking, like, it's hard to productize hours.
Yeah, and I remember this was at one of the DMG events. I got into a debate with an expert based on it, because if you are a large company that's scaling, that is one of the most difficult things to implement. Like, that's perfect if you're in like a 5 to 10 person shop, but once you begin to grow, you have quoting, processes and procedures, and that is just way too, ephemeral and, amorphous for me to be able to train somebody on. What kind of watch were they wearing? Like, just doesn't, I don't know. Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, what she has there is she provides a lot of great feedback, and we'll also later on provide a full link to the entire episode, the entire recording, which I highly recommend taking a look at as well. All right, so I'm going to go to the next clip, right? So we talked about process. We talked about those process documents. This is what Alyson says when we asked, how finite should you make your processes? This is very interesting.
Like, every single thing that happens. So 1 click, 2 click, 3 click, 4 click, especially for the agencies, right? I mean, in this case, this is why we love agencies so much, is because their work matters in growing small businesses, period. And they have some of the most nuanced processes that probably exist right now in the marketplace. And my thought is that if there is a way that, a business owner has generated amazing results for clients and that needs to go out further and scale, then we need to make sure that the processes are flawless. We need to make sure that folks can execute to the number and be able to create those results again and again and again. So my thought is by the click.
To the click.
Wow, that's like crazy. But that's government is by the click as well. Like, contracts are by the click. There's no room for wiggle room. But we don't go that deep. I mean, that's a little excessive.
Right. And yeah, and her and I talk about that a little bit further. But I think that also depends on a culture, right?
Correct.
If you want, and especially when it comes to like, let's say you have like social media or some of those other things, if it's down to the click, you could potentially remove certain components that one culture may find necessary to get success, whereas the other culture, no, like they're making the mistakes. They need that.
Well, in a couple of in later clips, you actually reference the Netflix CEO, and I think you make some great points, and it speaks to this point. So we'll save it for them, but.
We'll save it to them. I like it. All right. So let's get to this next one, because, we're talking about processes, how finite should you make them? The next question, of course, is, what should your processes look like? How many processes, should you have? And this is what Alyson had to say to that.
think of the playbook as knowledge, right? I know that's very ethereal, but think of it that way. And then inside of the playbook, if we're thinking of it, let's just say like a spreadsheet, right? It's knowledge is the spreadsheet. And then each of the tabs are the topics in knowledge that you know for sure you're an expert on, right? So it's the departments of your agency, and it's the services that you offer, and it's the training of your employees. And so you are an expert in your business because you've gotten results based on, whatever it is you've, IP'd and all of that stuff. So to me, it starts with the knowledge, the expertise. And then inside of the expertise, there are specific topics, if you will, right? So like chapters in a book. We're going to discuss this today, and it's called SEO client management. And here are all of the ways that we do that in the specific linear order. And really drilling down and saying, okay, we can phase out this process. So for example, if you think of a book, right? And then you've got sections or, sections in a book, and then you've got chapters in a book, and then you've got your pages. Your pages are your processes. Your sections are probably the departments of your company. The chapters are your specific services.
Oh, it's a great explanation. It's a really good understanding of it, taking it in a book format. And Dave, I know you've written most of the processes that we have, and you've also followed that structure as well. What other advice do you think we could add to that based on putting together the process document structure and what they should look like?
So the first play in every playbook is how do you alter the playbook? That to me was the light bulb going off. Is it's not just about processes and documenting it, but how do you grow it, and how does this evolve, and what's that process look like? So my first step was documenting the process for which employees can suggest and make changes to our process document. It's a crucial step that nobody thinks of.
And so, I'm speaking from and I think that's great advice. I'm thinking from my personal experience, because I'm writing, our sales processes out, and I do it more from like a writer standpoint, long form, definitely not by the click. It's more principle based than process based. What would you say to somebody that gets hung up?
I say just document as you go. Like as you're entering an action for the first time since you've decided to start documenting right there. Don't approach it as you need to document everything you do this week. It's too much. Just as you're doing the next time a repeatable thing comes up, say, all right, I'm going to document these steps. So make it part of your day-to-day, not your all-day job.
Perfect. I think that's a great segue into the next clip, which is asked, how often should you review your processes?
If you're looking at your data, if you're collecting data, then weekly, you should have 52 options throughout the year to pivot. Right? So if, for example, something is coming up in the week 1 data where you're like, this looks a little bit off, then my recommendation would be what process supports that result or that number, and let's go back and look at it and make some tweaks. So if you have a COO or an ops manager or somebody in that role, that is their core management job, is to go back and look at that data, obviously setting it all up. So there's kind of 2 phases to that, right? Is like the ops setup phase, and then the ops kind of review and refresh and tweak kind of phase. So if you have somebody in that seat, weekly. If you don't have somebody in that seat and you are a smaller business and you don't have too many moving parts, like kind of that smaller type agency I was referring to before, you only have a few team members, I would say monthly to quarterly, but strive to move to weekly. I track my stuff weekly, and I literally sit down with my team weekly and I say, why did so-and-so's cost per process go up this week? And I take a look at the client load that we had, and I said, oh, great. It's because we were working with a solar panel installation company, way outside of scope, way outside of who we normally deal with. That's why. And so to me, seeing the numbers each and every week and going back and asking the team, it makes the team more collaborative. They know that I know that they're doing a good job, and that I'm not just saying, tyrantly, why on earth are you guys costing me more money? I understand that they have things that they're going through. And it also really helps, like I said before, it gives me 52 opportunities to pivot versus 4 if we're lucky that businesses do quarterly planning if we're lucky. So just providing opportunities to pivot is one of the banner reasons why we look at it weekly.
I love how she explained that.
Yeah.
She's taking KPIs and she's comparing those to her process document. So it's very iterative, fluid, and very flexible.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to do it weekly. Man, seems like a lot of work. We do it monthly, and it worked really well for us. I could imagine doing it weekly.
It reminds me of this. A lot of this started process document. We're talking to Gabe Shaulin. It was episode 4 where he learned it from working with the Ritz, right? The hotel, and then he built that into his intranet, and that's how he built a very successful agency, Blue Fountain. But it's like I said earlier, right? The processes are only as good as the systems in place to make sure that you're managing them. And comparing those to KPIs is not something that I've ever done. Is that something we even do?
Yeah, we have that's the financial document that every team and every salesperson, every account manager has. That's ultimately what that is. So the key is like, how quickly do you extract your numbers? How, and that what gives us a huge advantage is that we're a technology company, not and marketing, but we have technology as a key component. So all these systems we use to do marketing and to do development and do everything have APIs, and we have the skills to tap into those APIs and automatically extract the data into formats that we need. So we're able to get teams and people their KPIs very fast, and it's not a painful process. Where some companies, that's all they do is collect data, or some role that's their only job is to collect data.
Yeah, and I guess I was maybe misinterpreting that because, I mean, definitely always looking at KPIs, and I'm always looking at the KPIs, but comparing those to what those processes are is something, I think I could walk away with that, right? So it would be more of, all right, how are these numbers reflecting the current processes we have in place, and what is that going to do to help us perform on a goal-based future level?
So she looked at it as, or how I interpreted it was, she has processes based off of the KPI result. So if this drops below 20%, then do what? That's how I took that.
Okay. Maybe we'll have to have her back on to clarify that. Yeah. I looked at it as kind of an open book meeting saying, all right, look, we're looking at our numbers. And like, let's say we have 2 screens. One is your KPIs, and then the other screen is your process document, where it's like, okay, all right, everything looks like it's good. We don't need to make any modifications there. Everybody understands the process. It's like, oh, no, these things drop. Do we need to modify our process based on what's happening?
It's not how I took that. So.
That's the beauty of having 2 people, man, 2 perspectives. That's why we do it this way after an interview.
Right.
All right. So, and speaking of that, right, a lot of that is structure, which tees up the next question when asked, which organization structures are the most successful, or is it irrelevant if you have the right process?
I personally, I think that your business is by design, and business owners start their business. It's almost like a thumbprint, right? Like you have your own unique genius. You've got your own unique skill set. You've got your own unique team with personalities that may or may not support a weekly huddle, may or may not support a daily, roundabout or a daily digest, right? At the end of the day. So it really does depend on what you want, right? Because you're the business owner, right? What you want and what your goals are for your business definitely trump a lot of things. The success of your clients definitely trump a lot of things. So making sure that those things to support your clients are in place, right? So if a nightly roundabout or an evening kind of meeting with all of your team members supports your clients best, I would advocate that you put that in until you find concrete data to support that you might need to move to 2 times a week or 1 time a week, right? So the structure and the way that you kind of, organize your departments and you organize your day to day really should support your goals as an entrepreneur, the services that you provide, the results of your clients, and, the culture of your team.
I love that answer. I think it's one of my favorite out of all of the questions that I asked her, because we see so many different companies, agencies, and firms looking for this, holy grail, this panacea to just fix all of their woes in being a business owner. When it comes down to just, you have to be confident in your own individuality and your ability to execute and be cool with that, right? Homogenization sucks. There's a reason that everybody's fighting for diversity. And I think that's important when it comes to businesses and the way they go about what they do, as long as they execute on their promises.
Yeah, I mean, the owner, so that's why everyone's chasing the shiny things, right? Because there's always a magical answer out there that's going to fix them. No, just get your processes down pat. Stop looking for a tool to make you have the right process. You know how to do good work. Now document it and then train people on how to use that document. So yeah. I love that answer. That's her best clip by far.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic. I mean, everybody, and I gave that after I watched it. During the editing phase, I had a meeting with somebody a couple of weeks ago with a similar question, and I said, "Your business is like a thumbprint." I stole it right from Alyson.
Yeah.
Now she's getting the credit. But yeah, that's true, and that's something that's a big takeaway here. That the way that you run your company and the way that you run your business is unique and individual to you, and that is something that you should embrace. To the most positive effect.
Yeah, 100%.
All right. And speaking of thumbprints and individuality and being different, the question, this is something we have not niched down. We focus in specific industries, but it's something I've struggled with for years and haven't done it out of the fear of essentially boredom, right? I'm doing the same thing. And I know there's a lot of people that have talked around that idea, but the question is, should one niche down on specialty or be full service? Which is recommended? And this is what Alyson had to say about that.
Full service agencies get a bad rap nowadays, to your point, right? So many folks are saying, niche down, productize, all of those things. And so personally, my thought is if you have a good relationship with your business and you want to offer full service, do what you feel is going to serve your clients the best. Now, if you're struggling with your relationship with your business, right? If you're really thinking to yourself, I'm not enjoying this, or I only like doing one thing, or I'm having trouble scaling, right? I'm having trouble accepting new business, then maybe niching down is a good idea for now. However, if you're in a situation where you're feeling good in your business, you're getting great amounts of business, right? You're getting great results for your clients. Why not continue to offer them the full service kind of omni approach to marketing? Because I was actually just talking with my marketing coach the other day, and he was telling me that we can't offer things in a vacuum, right? Everything needs to kind of be in context, and the market needs to understand why this new thing's rolling out. They need to have anticipation about why it's rolling out. So that might be several different platforms worth of content to go out to tell somebody about this new thing. And so my thought is that I need a full service approach, right? I need a full service approach to launch this thing. And so in my mind, I'm thinking, well, what full service agencies do I know? And I immediately started thinking about them, because my thought is that if you aren't full service, right, you must really like this one thing. And so you need to commit to really liking this one thing. And the full service agencies, they just love this omni approach, and they love to tinker, and they love to learn new things. And I personally am kind of that person too, which is why I'm full service. If someone comes to me and they say, I use blank technology that I've never used before, I'm like, cool, I'm going to log in later. That sounds great. And so to me, I don't like to quell that like sense of wonder in an agency. And so if it's working for you and you want to document, I think that that's probably the biggest, card you can pull, like right in your back pocket, is like, let's make sure that once we offer a new service, we get it documented and we make sure that folks know what types of results to expect. That's probably the silver bullet, if you will, to having the full service agency, to knowing for sure that, things are documented and supporting you on the back end.
Big takeaway there. I love that answer as well. I'm all about, essentially, I guess it is full service. We're a digital agency. We don't do a lot of like traditional based things, right? But I love that, because the takeaway there is niche down if whatever you're doing isn't working. That's when you niche down. From an operational standpoint or a sales standpoint, that's when you should niche down. Otherwise, keep doing what it is that you're doing.
If it's not broke, don't, what's the saying? If it's not broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if your business is operating correctly now, but some people might say, hey, I want margin. I want 30% margins. I don't have that. How do I get more of that? Well, you could niche down. You could do value-based pricing. You could change something. But what is it? Stop changing just to change, though.
Right.
And I see that a ton. It's like constant with some of the, agencies I follow. It's like their process. It's in their process to change constantly. And I just find that so inefficient.
Yeah, you can evolve yourself into extinction, right? So it's just, you just keep changing and changing and changing. It's not going to work.
Right.
And then also I had a call. It was just this morning with a national company, and they're somebody that's currently working with them is a niche-based company, right? And that's all they work is in the food service industry. And that's all they work with is food service brands. We don't have a food service brand. I don't even know if we'll get the contract. And I was completely open with this guy about it. He's a wonderful guy. But I told him that I asked him, actually, I said, well, why are you talking to me when we don't have any food service information in our portfolio? He said, because I've worked with 2 other food service companies and they all keep doing things the same way. They keep thinking the same way. The hope is working with you would be looking at the problem differently. And that is also a great selling point. Whenever you run into somebody that is, all right, we do the niche based, we have this process line. This is exactly how we do it. There's a ton of ways to sell about that. But if you also are a niche based agency, good for you. I respect what you're doing. You're a little bit stronger than me in some areas, which, I don't have the capacity to do it. So speaking about all these operations, though, it can be this amorphous term, right? So I wanted to define and ask Alyson, how do we define operations? Is it its own thing or is it separate?
I think operations is its own thing. So we've kind of got a couple of things. So in terms of the ops side of the business, in my opinion, we've got, so the process creation and planning, that's like foundational first and foremost. We've got efficiency improvements and technology. So inviting like new things to help us work faster. We've got quality and cost control, and profit starts to creep in there, right? Like really starting to take a look at, okay, what are our margins now? Where do we want them to be? Growth and scale is probably the next tier to that. And then profit only is number 5.
I love that answer. And the reason that question is important is because multiple times I've asked people like, oh, well, what is it that you do? What are you in charge of? Like, oh, I'm operations. It's like, oh, cool. Well, what does that entail? And they list every absolute function in the entire business. And it's like, well, no, then your job is business. It's not operations. And I think it's important to have a distinction between certain functions. Sales is not a function of operations. Operations, in my opinion, is the doing of the work. All those things that are involved in the processes in general span the entire business, but the doing of the work is mainly in operations. And of course, you can pull in some of the others as well.
But also sales, how sales interacts with the team, how they deliver the proposals, how those are part of operations as well. So operations does touch everything, but to me, operations is how does sales work with everyone else.
I think it's how the work is done, and of course, how the work gets done touches
That's also part of it.
Everything, right?
Correct.
So there's like a document that, all right, hey, this is the operations, and this is how this business operates.
Yes.
As far as operations is concerned, it's the doing of the work as its primary function.
Yep.
And all right, let's say that a business is doing what it's supposed to be doing, whether it's niche or whether it's not niche. One of the questions that always comes up, and as Dave mentioned, profit margins, right? So she speaks with tons of agencies. So this is a very relevant question to her when asked, what's a healthy profit margin for an agency?
It would depend on, again, size, because sometimes when we work with external contractors, it would also depend on the amount of services that you offer. But I would say if you are an agency who's mid-range, again, the 10 million to 500,000, and you have in-house team, I would say that you're probably looking at like 40%, 30%. Right, as a solid profit margin, at least in our experience, after kind of working through some of these kinks. Now, if you're white labeling almost everything and paying whatever agencies' premium prices are are, accepting at that time, your profit margin can vary quite a bit, especially if you're pricing based on their pricing and not doing value-based pricing like we talked about before. You really can, start to see things kind of start to creep a little bit more, especially if you're paying, $450 an hour for somebody's time. So again, that can vary quite a bit. But if you have an in-house team, if you are really tracking well, and you are looking to, start to standardize a little bit, I would say 30 to 40% is really, really good.
I would love 30 to 40%. That's absolutely exceptional. And I know some out there are getting it. I think, what are we at? We have like what, 20%, Dave?
25%.
25%.
Yeah. So we're not that far off. 30, that seems hard. And
I think that could be the niche though, right?
Yeah.
That's the beauty of it. There's a trade-off though, right? So it's all right. I think it's quality of life based on what it is that you're working at. I couldn't do hotels all day long or dog food companies. I need that diversity.
I absolutely agree with that, but I would also then challenge you to say, well, if you'd write down the process of how to manage a hotel, website, then you can basically, ship it to a team and then let them do it. But yeah, it's boring. It just working in the same thing over and over and over again would just be boring. But that's how you get the crazy margins. So it's trade-offs.
It is, yeah, and it's okay taking a little bit less, right? Because you could, right, if you could be much more wealthier if you saved everything. You bought the cheapest toothpaste, you bought that sandpaper toilet paper, you got that beater vehicle that's just throwing all the exhaust into the from 1970s. But what's really going to be the quality of life there, right?
The trade-off is the quality of life later down the road.
I don't know, man. That toilet paper can really, do some damage.
Well, there's some things, which is speaking of marketing, that's why Boar's Head. Are you familiar with that brand? Sold in Publix. Yeah. So I love their tagline of "Compromise elsewhere."
Yeah,
it's a great tagline.
I agree. Yeah, they got, man, dude, you get a sandwich. I mean, for us in Florida, in the mainly Southeast, because Publix is it's expanding. There's Pub Subs, which they have the best bread, and get it with Boar's Head every time. Just so delicious. Oh, and a little carb reducing tip, by the way, have them scoop the bread out.
Interesting.
Yeah, just learned that the other day. Yeah, one of our clients when he ordered a sandwich. Yeah. Oh. All right. So the next question we asked her is, what is the best way to track agency or to track data across an agency and operations, which I know we've spoke a lot about recently. This is what she had to say about that.
My thought is there's a couple of things. So my number 2 fills out our scorecard, and then each department basically has their own metrics that they own. And so I personally feel like we automate as much as we can. So don't get me wrong. Some of the data does auto-populate into our spreadsheet with really simple scripts. But I think that the practice of having someone, let's just say an account manager, I'll go back to that example I gave before. It takes 2 days on average to onboard a client. And let's just say it jumps to 5, and they physically need to put that number into a spreadsheet, right? Mm-hmm. Think about the mental preparation that person is doing as they're doing that work, right? They're sitting here thinking, okay, crap, why did this raise to 5? I know I'm going to talk with Allie on our weekly huddle, and she's going to ask me why this is 5 and what answer am I going to have? So they already come to the table with this data saying to me, okay, look, I understand this is 5, but here's how I'm going to make it better. It makes these conversations quick, and it makes solutions happen fast.
We did something similar to this in the past, where it was on our SEO team, where we had everybody adding figures, and this is kind of anecdotal to what she said, which I think she gives a fantastic answer. But I think there's something to be said when people are entering in their own metrics when it's not completely automated. I believe there's more of an attachment to the result rather than it being automated. They have a sense of ownership and buy-in in that. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I'm a little torn on that because I feel like in my experience, I think we would end up constantly having to track down people putting in their numbers. I mean, it's hard enough
the trade-off
creating a process to get somebody to follow through the whole quarter. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, if I had to rely on other people to put in their own numbers, I'd get them for 3 weeks, and then the fourth week I'd be like, "Hey, come on, where's these numbers at?"
That's a great point. Yeah, you have to chase them. And I think an exception to that, of course, is never have anybody put in their own time. Time should be tracked, essentially as somebody's doing it. If you wait till the end of the day to do something like that, it's never going to happen. Right.
Which is why we have to create automatic scripts to email people to say, "Hey, you didn't put your time in."
So. Exactly. And she mentioned scorecard. So this is what she said when I asked, what should every agency have on their scorecard? Okay, because I know there is. I think it was Netflix, the CEO of Netflix. His first company, he created processes for everything, and then he felt that it killed the dynamism. Right, like people just weren't thinking for themselves, and he hired his, I don't know, maybe these were his words, minions to work those processes. Right, and then when he did Netflix, he did it a different way. And granted, they're different companies. Do you see a difference between a service company versus a product company and the way they should go about, the operations and the systems that they create? Should there be wiggle room?
I like that question because obviously, if we think about our services, right, they should be as standard as a product, right? We think about Apple, right? We think about like opening up that beautiful like cellophane and we're just like, oh man, I'm enamored with this experience, right? And they have a product, but in my opinion, it's still an experience, right? So I think our services are very similar, right? Folks want to know what to expect and they want to expect the best when they come to us. And so the way that they document is likely very, very similar. I am always erring on the side of document more than you think you have to, and then be able to fall back on that, right? And if we never open up a document, it's better than needing the document and not having it. And that's just always how I've lived my life. I'm a very prepared person. I'm a classic over preparer, and I'm always kind of like gathering my stones, and like I know I have them in my pockets, and if I never have to throw them, then like cool, like I'm so happy about that. And that's just how it always is. And in my opinion, it just helps me kind of sleep better at night. So yeah, product and service businesses should likely go about their process documenting the very same way, because what they ultimately want to do, right, is wow their customer, get them amazing results. And what that is in and of itself is, in my opinion, it's a product, right? You're buying something.
So that wasn't the question I asked that teed it up. But I asked the question right before it, which I think was perfect. And I think the takeaway is, it depends on, your company and your culture and how you're going to go about it.
But to comment on the clip, I absolutely love that approach. I mean, I am the same way. I run through scenarios for fun. Just I'm always thinking about what happened, the constant just prep. And so when situations arise, you just execute now. You've already thought about it. Now you just need to do it. So it's, I think, a great attribute of a business leader is not being taken surprise. And that's what she's saying, is think through it, prepare. And that way situations, and even to take her point to the extreme, she even says when things happen, she's got a process. So
would you say that you're an over-preparer?
Yeah. I'm always telling people. So look, our developers always quote on the ideal world. And I always quote based on what's probably going to happen. And all your ideal scenarios aren't going to be ideal. They're going to be difficult and challenging, and something's going to break that you didn't expect, and things like that. So it's.
I look at that. I don't know. I don't know if I would consider that over preparing. I think I guess if you're going to address a client and concerns, let's say that you're doing a presentation, it only needs 5. Would you have like 10 just in case? You following me? That's what I consider the over preparer. And I've worked with some over preparers, some fantastic, some to a fault. And that's where it's like, all right, look, it's only going to take 2 hours of work, but they spent 6 doing it.
Yeah, but she's saying more like You know,
No, I'm just curious. Yeah, outside of that, I'm not even
gotcha.
Thinking of that. Yeah.
No, I'd probably just do 5, but I'd probably have some in my head ready to go fast. I might not prepare them in the same format.
Yeah, which I find is interesting. But no, I think you should be prepared for any situation that you have, you know, to the circumstance, but also kind of going into that Reed Hastings mode. You want to have the dynamism and be able to respond and to react to whatever comes your way. Because also the fear is, and I know some people are going to question this, especially when it comes to processes and the conversations I've had with people about processes, they don't want to create a McDonald's out of their agency or their company. They don't want these, you know, burger flippers that are just, you know, doing things, you know, step by step by step by step, which just removes that human element where they'll eventually be replaced by a robot. Food for thought. So, speaking to all that, in operations, you know, what is the most important? You know, how do you make it successful? This was the next question that I posed to Alyson, and this is what she said.
The biggest problem that I see is the accountability and the team buy-in stuff. So I think that, you know, you just can't manage, or you come across more of a variety when you're talking about like managing personalities, right? And I think that that's probably where some of the biggest struggles that we've had, you know, lie. And I think the other big one is kind of wrangling in the, you know, the CEO or the founder type, right? Is saying like, well, what exactly do you want to do here? And what exactly are we thinking is the best data? And what exactly are we thinking is the best service suite? So I would say those two things, right? Is making the kind of vision CEO like type of, you know, person kind of hunker down and say, okay, this is exactly what I want. And this is exactly what my growth goals are for the business. And then having the team buy in and enlist and say, okay, yes, I'm ready to do this. And I'm ready to be held accountable to what we say we want in this room.
Accountability. What has to happen? What do you want to have happen is one of my favorite sentences, right?
Yeah.
So, all right, this is what I want to have happen. How do you, you know, make sure that gets fulfilled? Which also brings up something else that for people to listen to the full episode, she has a great conversation about the difference between agreements and expectations. Just wanted to give that plug for when I released the full episode. What were your thoughts on what she said, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much agree with everything she said. I don't really have anything to challenge it.
When it comes to accountability, what are some exercises that you've seen when somebody is not being accountable?
I mean, basically, you know, this kind of goes back to the KPI review that we do monthly and with team members. And, you know, the way we're structured, everyone is in charge of their numbers, and their numbers drives everything. And they know when their numbers are falling. So that's their accountability. And that they know that they're going to have a reduced budget if the numbers continue to slide. So.
All right. I think that's a great way to go about it. And then this is the last question that we asked her that I think is, there's books been written about this. There's philosophies and methodologies that counter this. But at the end of the day, this is one of our most fleeting resources. And one thing that, of course, if you don't manage it well, you won't have, you know, a good quality of life nor a successful company. And the question is, should employees track their time?
It depends. It depends on the team member. I have team members who are hourly, and I also have team members who are on salary or on retainer. And I think it depends on the type of work that they're doing. So for example, all of our process writers are hourly so that I can track, you know, how much time they spend and how, you know, how much my cost per process is. Now, my number two, my manager, my person who needs to potentially meet with me and think of new ideas and who can help me really understand the holistic, you know, client journey and some of those soft skills that really are developed by working with me for a while. You know, that person is paid on salary. And so I think really what it comes down to is everyone still has KPIs. We need to decide how important those KPIs are to the business. And then that also decides what they're making basically and at what rate.
Tracking time, just one of those things that's hard to get employees to do, but it is inherently important. And I like how she put that. So the takeaway there is if let's say that you have somebody that's, tied to production work, then you should be tracking their time toward that because that's what you're selling. And if you're not tracking your time toward that, then you're stealing from yourself. It's terrible. And also, if you have a project manager that isn't necessarily, tied to there, you can use that blended rate version, which I know we've talked about in the past, or you can do a percentage based that you tack on to your projects. So no matter what, you should be able to work it out. And I'm just a big advocate for making sure anybody in production is tracking their time.
It just reminds me of the saying that nothing can be improved that isn't measured. Right? Yeah. So if you're not measuring how long it takes to do something, how do you improve? How do you know it's not working right? So I hate it. It's annoying, right? Nobody loves to do it. But I think in the agency world, I think you have to do it. And people need to know how much time you guys spent to pull off this project, even if you're in value-based pricing or hourly. You need to know how much time it took.
Yeah, I agree. And a little hack, for some people is that Pomodoro technique, right? That's where you work, I think it's 30 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break, so on and so forth. So based on getting things done, knowing how long they take is extremely important, especially from a focus standpoint. If you're bouncing all over the place and you're not focused on one thing, if you just track your time, like, okay, I'm going to work on this next thing and only this next thing for 15 minutes, the probability of you getting things done quicker and more effectively, it's right there.
Right. I think talking about this, it really exposes why value-based pricing is so much more valuable because, we charge by the hour. Well, when you have a resource that's 4 years deep into what we do with our processes, they're really efficient. We have people on our team that are really good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And so they're accomplishing the goals and results in half the time now. Mm-hmm. And we're actually getting less money for our results because of that. And so that really does showcase where the advantage of value-based pricing comes.
Yeah, there's the productization of it. And now, from a humility standpoint, the other downside to hourly based pricing is you have a locked revenue structure based on the number of employees and the hours that you can sell. Your capacity is completely locked. So that's one of the other beauties of the other. And if you create small products, so let's say we just have like, all right, our SEO analysis is $2,800 and that takes us 7 minutes and it's automated. Like, all right, cool. Those are great. And I'm an advocate for those types of things. What I'm not an advocate for is, our web design, our custom web design costs $22,000, right? It's like, there's so many other things that could go into that. And you have to put so many different guardrails that no matter what, then you're still charging an hourly. You're having a different way of talking about
it. This is why niching down works so well with value-based pricing, because once you become known in the industry as the leading agency that delivers results, you're really not selling projects anymore. You're selling results. And people will buy that value-based pricing because they know if they buy that productized marketing campaign from John, I'm going to get these results and I want those. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I agree. And it also takes being really stern with your clients because the conversation is weird. Like, let's say your results are a little bit off and they're like, well, why didn't we get this? Right. So now if you become the abused one in that relationship and you're, for whatever reason, things aren't going well, you now go above and beyond over the time that you would allot. And now you're making $7 an hour versus what you should have been making, at the 150. So there's a lot of different sides. So there's a lot of strictness and adherence that has to happen to it. And it doesn't scale well. I would love to see some value-based pricing, agencies that have scaled. I welcome them on the show. Shoot me an email, John. JON@digitalmastermind.com. I would love for you to tell your story of how you scaled. And what I mean by scaled, it's not from 2 employees to 4. What I'm looking at is, all right, you are a 50 to 100 person plus agency.
Almost thinking through this, blended. I don't see how a hybrid company would even work. Like, how do you do hourly and value-based pricing?
Well, you would have products, right? If you're going to do value-based pricing, you would have kind of like off the shelf, like, systems and things that you can sell. Like I said, SEO analysis. You could have strategy-based sessions that are blocks that are technically only 4 hours, but you sell it for, an absolute premium because of that result that you were speaking to earlier.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think
interesting clip.
What's that? You're breaking up real bad.
Yeah. I just said interesting clips. I think, editing this interview was super valuable. I really enjoyed the information she presented, how she presented it. I love operations. I love her passion for operations. And I think, her service, sounds incredible. It's unique. Never even imagined that companies exist as a fractional operations person.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic. And I've thought about that too, right? If you're going to ship out your production, what would that look like? And it's not necessarily the production. Some people do that. This is the management of the operations. Definitely want to give Alyson Caffrey a plug, the operations agency. So if you are an agency, a company that's struggling with your operations, you need somebody to write your processes. She has, I believe, 5 process writers on staff. So if you don't want to do it, she has some other processes for you to write your processes. It's getting super meta there, where you can film what it is that you're doing. You send it to her. She has a more solid pitch for her services in the full episode, but I highly recommend you reaching out to her. She's a fantastic person, stellar results, and she obviously has a wealth of information. I'm happy she was able to join us on the climb. So to sum things up, everybody, I appreciate you tuning in. If you're watching this in a recording, thank you so much as well. And if you want to join the Digital Mastermind, if you're an agency and you want all those tips and tricks I mentioned, you want to engage with people on this type of level and really get your agency to where you want it, go ahead and visit us at digitalmastermind.com. Shoot me an email, johnjon@digitalmastermind.com, or find me on LinkedIn. Well, that's it, everybody. Thank you so much.